In this video, we're just going to discuss finding the domain and the range of piecewise functions. So in example 1, we have already graphed the function. We just need to pick out what the domain and the range would be. So for the domain, we want to think about how far does our graph go left to right and write it in that order. And we're thinking of our x values just like we always do for domain. So think about left to right, how far could I go on this graph? So I could go from left forever because it points in that direction to the left with that blue part of my graph. And I could continue going all the way to the right. So we would say that the domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity. Another way you can look at it is by looking at the intervals in the function. I'm trying to scroll down. There we go. All right, so in the intervals of your function, you can look and see what's happening right here. So it says x is less than -2, so you can kind of draw a number line and put -2, and x is less than that. So put an open circle at -2 and draw shaded to the left where numbers are less than -2. But then in the next interval, it says x is greater than or equal to -2. So you could fill it in because it's equal to -2 and it's shaded to the right. So notice what we put for domain would match all real numbers because that is what is included in those two intervals. Now the range is a little harder to look at because it's not just listed in those intervals up above, but you always want to think of it the same way every time. What's the lowest y value on your graph to the highest y value on your graph? So you think about the lowest y value is definitely going to be negative infinity because these two are both pointing down forever, both pieces of our graph. But then if we travel up the graph, there's definitely a highest point we get to, and then we have to stop. And that highest value for y is 3. And then it's a solid point, which means it's equal to 3. So we need to put a bracket to represent that it's equal to 3. So range is negative infinity to 3. All right, let's look at the next one. So this graph we've already worked on in a previous set of notes to get this one graphed. Now let's think of domain and range. So domain is from left to right. What are the x values that are included in this graph? So you can look at it and think of it from left to right. You can also use these intervals up here to help write it out. So if you think about these intervals on a number line, the first interval says x is less than or equal to 0. So we put 0, x is less than or equal to. So I'm going to shade it in and shade to the left for less than. Then it says x is between 0 but not equal to 0, and it goes up to 3. It's less than or equal to 3, and it's greater than 0. So that would take us up to 3. And then this last piece of our function, the last interval, says x is greater than 3. So then we have everything included. We can say that that is all real numbers or negative infinity to positive infinity. You can also think of going along the graph from the left, which I could go forever to the left. And then all the x values are included along the way. So where one is open, another one is closed. So every x value did get included from the left of my graph to the right of my graph. Now for the range, let's think about it from the lowest y value to the highest y value. So we do need to look at the graph for the range. So the lowest y value would be right here, and it's not equal to this number, but that is the lowest possible y value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, it's at -5, but it's not equal to -5, so we put a parentheses. Then the highest value, so you go up the graph and see if everything's included. So I can get as high as 4, but then I could go over to this blue part of my graph and I could keep going up. So as long as I could continue to include all the y values and continue to go up my graph, I can. So I would say that this one goes to infinity. So -5 to infinity. All right, and for this last example, again, let's think of the domain is left to right, and it's your x values. So from left to right, this one's not too bad to just look at it and see. I could go left forever because that blue piece of my graph is facing left with that arrow forever to the left. And I can travel to the right up to x equals 2. But then I could hop onto this red graph and I could continue to go to the right forever. So we'd say this includes all real numbers for the domain. And then the range, so think of your lowest y value to the highest y value, and you want to think of y values. So the lowest y value, start at the bottom of your graph, and you want to think there, right there is the lowest y value. So that's negative 1, 2, 3, negative 4, and it's an open circle, so we need to put a parentheses to represent that it's not equal to negative 4. And then if you travel up this graph, you could just keep on going up on that red part of the graph forever. So it goes to infinity. Okay, so that's it for a few examples of domain and range of piecewise functions.